Fantastic. So first of all, hi everybody, welcome. So today is the launch of the output of the third working group in apparel and footwear from the BCI. So today what we're doing is presenting this document, which it's a guidance, has some recommendations. And and it's going to be, we're going to have some presentations as well, right? So for those of you who are not familiar with the BCI, with the Value Change Initiative, we are a peer-to-peer learning forum. We have more than 130 organizations today, and that means that we have a network of around 500 individuals who are experts on Scope 3. And what we do together is that we discuss, so first we look into standards, we interpret the standards jointly, and then we discuss the solutions for the gaps and things that still need to have a little bit of a joint operationalization. Yes, and also just to mention, as I said, we have more than 130 members today. A lot of the work that we do is in the food and ag sector, but we also, as today, we're presenting the work that we do in the apparel sector. But we also have in our membership, so we have corporates, but also brands. We have also some NGOs, implementers, service providers, etc. Right? So basically, the main thing that we all have in common is Scope 3. Now, today, and I'm going to present very briefly the agenda because this is more or less what we're going to be doing for the next 50 to 55 minutes. So we're going to, right now I'm giving you just the opening just to explain a little bit what is the process, what we did, etc. Then we're going to have a keynote by Deepika Mishra. So she is representing US Cotton Trust Protocol. And it's very interesting and very timely because she's also going to talk a little bit about the use of certificates in cotton. So that's great. Then we're going to give you a short presentation about what is in this output and also what are the developments that we have captured, some of the takeaways, etc. And then, of course, at the end, just to close with this, we are going to have two of the working group members, so Anneke Koenig and Dan Rowe, giving some of the reflections and some of the learnings that they have had during the process, right? And then, of course, we go to closing. Today, we have enabled the function of the Q&A. So if you have any comment, any question, please just type in there. And we would be happy to respond either live when we have time, and we will try to do so, or if not, via online, or if not, we will follow up as well. So with that, let me introduce our speakers today. As I mentioned, Deepika Mishra from the US Cotton Trust Protocol, Anneke Koenig from Bestseller, Dan Rowe from Primark, and of course, me. And thank you very much. So, and just to close this brief opening, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this process that we are closing today, right? Because the working groups in BCI, these are processes. Basically, we work with a number of corporates and brands, also implementers, service providers, NGOs, etc. So what we do is that we have a process that goes between 9 months to 1 year, more or less. So actually, if you see, we kicked out this working group in April last year, and we finalized more or less the discussions around December. So it was a 9-month process in discussions. During those discussions, we tried to collectively come to an agreement of which are the most pressing challenges at that time in terms of Scope 3 for the sector. We prioritize some of the challenges, and then we pick those topics to discuss some of the solutions that are there. We also take as a reference what is there from current standards. So for example, the ASIS practices, the status quo, but also we feed into, or we try to get new perspectives or new developments from the Scope 3 landscape. And then, of course, together we work out this output that we are presenting today that captures all this thinking and some of the recommendations and conclusions. Also to say that in this working group, we had two case studies, which were very interesting. So also Deepika is going to talk a little bit about one of these case studies. But this is also important to understand some of the specific issues that we will find when we're talking about certain things in carbon accounting, right? Just the last thing to mention that, of course, this output complements and builds upon the body of work, the broader body of work from BCI, right? So we are constantly developing, we're constantly trying to look into the things that are emerging for Scope 3 solutions. So that was just a brief introduction. Thank you so much to all the members and participants of this edition of the working group. I think that this also helps to have different perspectives in the room, really good discussion. So thanks again to all of you. And then, yeah, without more delay, let's go to the keynote from Deepika. Deepika, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Silvana. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. Really excited. We were excited to be part of this Apparel working group, and today we got a chance to speak more about it. Without much ado, okay, perfect. So, sorry, I'm just having a little bit trouble right here. Okay, so a little bit of background on myself. I'm Deepika Mishra. I work as standards and data lead consultant for US Cotton Trust Protocol. My background involves PhD in plant and soil sciences. And throughout this journey, one thing that has often resonated me is, and this is what I believe, data isn't just numbers. It tells us where we have been, where we are, and where we must go. And today we will explore how we are revolutionizing sustainability accounting in the cotton industry and what this means for apparel and footwear brands. A little bit into who we are, US Cotton Trust Protocol. US Cotton Trust Protocol was launched in 2020 and it is a voluntary sustainability program for all US cotton growers and traceability platform for all US cotton. The program, it helps both farmers and brands meet their sustainability goals. More importantly, helps farmer in their best management practices. A little bit on how is the trust protocol unique. If you think about the word sustainability today, it's just a buzzword. I would call it as a battleground. Brands are under pressure to disclose, farmers are under pressure to perform, and everyone here trying to navigate a maze of regulations, CSRD, green claims, eco design, so on and so forth. And at this time, when sustainability and raw material sourcing are at the forefront for brands and retailers, Trust Protocol offers verified data on the 6 key sustainability metrics of cotton production. And also, it provides article level supply chain transparency, tracing every step of your product from farms to fiber. And together, this represents one of the most ambitious and comprehensive sustainability initiatives available. With that, where we are today. In 4 years, Trust Protocol has achieved significant milestones, enrolling over 2,500 global members across 46 countries, engaging more than 45 global brands and retailers. Our grower participation increased by 35%, covering 2.1 million acres. In fact, the enrollment for the 5th year is right now happening as we speak. We have 22 board members who again have an international representation, and right now our data maturity is, as we launched in 2020, it's been 4 years. With that, what is the primary role? What do we do with this data? We collect all this data. What do we do? One of the big role of trust protocol is, and it's a very critical part of our work, is navigate this complex regulatory landscape. We are actively working to ensure alignment with CSRD and the CSDD, which sets out new requirements for companies. We're also closely monitoring developments of EU regulations, Green Claims Directive, deforestation regulation. We also are actively engaged in EU policy making by submitting feedback to public consultations. Again, that's relative to upcoming to the textile regulation revision, apparel and footwear, PEFCR. so on and so forth. So, and again, we will continue engaging with all relevant authorities whenever possible when it comes to the regulation space, when it comes to the accounting space and traceability. With all this in mind, this is who US Cotton Trust Protocol is. And right now, what I would like to address and what I call is elephant in the room. In sustainability reporting, often there is a gap between promise and practice. Companies, they face challenges with data collection, verification, and reporting. And let's confront the problem. Traditional certifications were not built for emissions accounting. Scope 3 reporting demands precision, it demands verifiable data. And today, most certification programs are not able to meet the bar. And we are left with a system where brands are investing in preferred cotton but can't credibly claim climate impact from it. And this is where trust protocol comes in. And here is where our data really becomes your strategic asset. Trust protocol gives you three powerful tools in one. First, you get verified metrics that align but perfectly with your SBTN, covering everything from water, from fresh water, biodiversity. Second, we have designed our reporting to meet CSRD requirements, which is again crucial as all these regulations are tightening. And third, this is big for many of you, we provide granular data year in year for your Scope 3 emissions reporting. Whether you are consuming protocol cotton or US cotton, we give you primary and secondary data that fits right into your ESG framework. And again, it's all about making reporting simpler while making your targets more credible. With this, I'd like to refer a little bit to the case study that we did with VCI and Regrow. And this example shows how we are applying our principles to deliver measurable results. So when you look at the case study, a big ambitious question, and when we collaborated, this was a major question that resonated with three of our organizations. What system is currently needed to claim scope 3 emissions and removals with certified cotton? And we prioritize two components. One is accounting and traceability. And if you look at the context, like just to give a little bit of background, apparel companies, they focus on tier 4 emissions from raw material. There is increasing demand for precision and accurate reflection of value chain investments in GHG inventories, and so on and so forth. What we found, the key findings, and I would like to call it, I could sleep additionally 1 hour extra a night after this case study, is the level of traceability and reporting categories and spatial boundaries. They play a very important role currently in defining the system. And physical traceability to at least the sourcing region is essential for both reporting emissions reductions and removals. And our protocol management solution provides physical traceability aligned with GHG protocol guidance. And what it does is this enables companies, sourcing companies, to make credible claims as they source their cotton. And in short, when we were asking this question, is US Cotton Trust Protocol adhering all the greenhouse gas protocol guidelines, all the current regulation landscape? In short, the answer is yes. Moving on with Regrow, and again, this whole case study would not have been possible without Regrow. So Regrow comprehensive approach to scope 3 measurement is just fantastic out there. And their system, they follow a 4-step process: data, monitor, measure, and actionable insight. What they do is they collect field level data and with the grower input. And then what happens is, using satellite imagery and farming practices that are being recorded by the growers, they monitor at scale, and then they measured the phase which pretty much quantifies carbon, greenhouse gas, water outcomes using all the IPCC Tier 3 models. And all of this translates into actionable insights. What it does, it gives you a GHG protocol compliant reporting, practice verification, and reduction strategies. And if you see in 2024, US Cotton Trust Protocol ran results on 50,000 acres. And here are the concrete results from our analysis. And you can see three key metrics. One is GHG emissions, net emissions, and sequestrations. Over here, you can see the GHG emissions has increased from previous years. The soil carbon sequestration is at 0.175. And the net emissions has increased a tad bit. And what it does is it helps us to measure, it helps us to see where we are in last year to know what we are doing this year and where we want to be in the future. Instead of setting ambitious goals and targets, we are realistically measuring it. With that, I wanted to move a little bit into traceability side. On traceability, if you think of traceability as microscope, the data is as a specimen, and together they let us see what matters. And with our PCMS, Protocol Consumption Management Solution, every bale of US cotton can be tracked, its environmental story can be quantified, and its emissions can be counted towards a brand Scope 3 reporting. And you can see how complex the entire textile supply chain is. There are 16 steps, and in this whole graph, and I'm going to take a little bit of minute here, how it works is each supply chain is crucial with key action needed for recording and verifying the fiber. Transaction validations are also recorded in the system. And this process, what happens, it gives an entire complete visibility to the brands and retailer members. At the beginning of the process, a brand selects which products to track. The supply chain is informed. The requirements are communicated to US spinners who source US cotton or protocol cotton. Merchants and cooperatives upload the initial fiber shipments with permanent bill identification number, which is again validated with the USDA FS database for authenticity and non-duplication. And this data is again sent to the supply chain system through a platform called Textile Genesis, where all suppliers, fiber, yarn, fabric, garment makers who are all members of Trust Protocol will perform key required steps. And with all of this, I like to go back to the slide, which I like to say elephant in the room, and what it means and why I'm bringing it up again is, as you know, we all all of the standards are expected to have a strict, rigorous due diligence compared to any other guidelines out there. It's an inherent thought process. If you as a standard, if you are a certified program, you are basically expected to do all the due diligence. And with this in mind, some of current certifications, I'd like to say that again, it's not made for the traditional certification, is not meeting the requirements of current demands. And what happens with Trust Protocol, as we have the data backing, we have the traceability. It's not a traditional certification system, but it is a data-driven, what we like to call is a data-driven assurance model. And moving on to the section 3 part of it, where I would like to say is how US Cotton Trust Protocol is helping in decarbonization of the sector. And one of the parts that you would notice is data alignment. On the left, you will see detailed mapping with SBT and targets, everything from water quantity to carbon sequestration. And on the right, you'll notice how we have aligned with CSRD, disclosed requirements. What you're seeing here is just a snapshot, and we have a comprehensive mapping of various ESG requirements. And we can have a conversation on the side how your goals can be fulfilled with our mapping. Again, We can talk about the specifics as you need, but what this slide shows you how the program from data to traceability aligns with all the components of ESG frameworks today. One of the key things that is non-negotiable for US Cotton Trust Protocol is technical rigor. Our emissions modeling, which we depend with field to market, regrow, is ISO aligned. It based on empirical region specific data. We support practice level traceability, and that ensures that results are audit ready. We are positioning our data to align with upcoming updates like SBTi's flag guidance. And again, the famous GHG protocol. This is about bridging not just with climate science, but it's more with brand accountability. And right now we are doing market testing with our removals from an intervention side. And just a quick note here, the amount of technical rigor, and again, we can have a side conversation, how well it's aligned, what model, whether it is DNDC, whether it is DASN model, we can go all deep into it. But it just shows the amount of data driven process that goes behind the system. Moving to the next slide. So this, I wanted to just give a few case studies again, just to point out greenhouse gas emissions. You can see starting from 2.4 pounds CO2e carbon, CO2e per pound of cotton, you can see we are at a 29% reduction that directly impacts your scope 2 reporting. The trend line here shows steady improvement with, of course, with stabilization at 1.7 over past 2 years. And why does this matter to you? First, you get clear, reliable numbers for your reporting. Second, you can show real progress in your supply chain. And third, by joining, you're aligning with a verified reduction trajectory as the years goes on. And as we push towards our 2025 goal of 39% reduction, your participation definitely helps building this momentum. And in the next slide over here on the practices that directly affects the greenhouse gas emission reductions and removals, we are seeing measurable emissions reductions. Like in cover crops, over here you can see 62% of the US Cotton Trust Protocol growers currently, this data is from 2024, currently practice cover crops. 56% of the US Cotton Trust Protocol does no-till farming. 78% of the grower does crop rotation. What this means, this practice is the reason we are showing this because this has a direct relationship to the emissions reductions and removals. And what it shows is how much it's being implemented at scale. The emissions impact that you see is real and it's growing. And we are working now directly to ensure how these improvements are not just captured, but they're recognized by global frameworks. And also our team, our data team, day and night constantly works on how can we help with the reduction and removals of this greenhouse gas emissions by optimizing on these practices, with ensuring all the credibility is made into account, is taken into account. I'd like to call this slide again as we continue this journey, several key questions, challenges, and I would most likely allude that to questions that keep us up at night. First is, can we maintain, when you think about traceability versus scale, can we maintain detailed traceability while scaling the program? And when you think about the granularity gambit, how detailed is detailed enough? Is just reporting the reductions and removal is enough? Or do we need to verify the models? Do we need to audit the system? What does it mean? How do we reconcile growing seasons with reporting calendars about the weather variabilities, with the spatial and the temporal variations? How do we meet tomorrow's regulatory demands today, where we got to future-proof the sustainability reporting? And how can we ensure farmers share in the value created? There are probably, I can add 100 questions to this, but these are some of the important questions. And what we are doing here is we are not just building a reporting tool, we are building a movement. If you think about it, where cotton is not just traced but trusted. And when you think about reporting, it's not just reported, it's rigorously measured year on year. And we need more alignment today, we need more co-creation. And I cannot thank enough the technical working group that we did with VCR, with Value Change Initiative and Regrow, which helped answer so many of our questions, where we are currently today with due diligence, where we are currently today with accounting, and where we are currently today with traceability. And I can't say this enough, how important the technical working group is, which drives the development of especially sector specific accounting methods. And when you think about certification system like ours, who are continuously evolving to meet this challenge, we need partners at every stage of this value chain. And we look forward working with many of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepika. So that was great. I know, so we have a box for questions and answers. So I'm going to invite the if anybody has any question for Deepika, please put it in the box, and then Deepika, please, you can take those questions, because I'm looking at the time. I think we're right on time. So let's just have a sneak peek of what is coming in this output. So also a little bit just sharing some of the reflections by Deepika. So indeed, I think that there are a lot of questions right now. For example, what she already explained about, the use of certifications and also the implications for traceability data. So this is just part of the topics that were explored in the context of the working group, right? So right now I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what was discussed and some of the key takeaways, but of course you have to read the output to see more. So let's just start, right? So first of all, what are we trying to do with this document is basically that we're trying to, so first of all, this is also something that is a public good, so you can download it. The idea is that we activate the sector to advance, to have a common understanding of the problems, a common understanding of the solutions, because we understand that that builds capacity. And when we build capacity, the professionals, the practitioners are better enabled to make decisions. Now, why is it so important to be so conscious when making decisions? Well, we are living some interesting years because a lot of things are in flux, right? So also we have to consider that, for example, if you think about the land-based emissions, the land sector removal guidance is upcoming at the end of the year. Then we have also all the GHG protocol suite of standards under revision. We have just a couple of weeks ago, or last week, the launch of the draft of the net zero standard from SBTi. So there are a lot of things happening right now, and it's very important to first have a good understanding of the implications of those, and also try to see what that means in the broader system, let's say. So this output is basically like, that's the purpose, right? So you can look at that, you can see some of the recommendations as well in terms of what would be best practices in certain things, what are the pathways to do certain things, etc., right? Now, in terms of what is in that document, so the document is structured mostly in 3 chapters, right? So of course we have the introduction and the closing, but the main content, we have 3 chapters. The first one talks about concepts that go across the value chain. And then of course we have one chapter that is dedicated to the tier 4 type of solutions. So basically on the land-based emissions, and another one on the tier 1 to 3 type of emissions, where we have different conditions, right? So what is important to know is that, for example, right now the focus on the tier 4 emissions, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, is very much the focus is on trying to understand and anticipate what will come in the land sector removal guidance, for example. On the others, of course, we have some reflections on the challenges, some of the proposed solutions, etc. Now, let's see what is cool about this first chapter, where we look into sector-wide concepts, right? Because I think that for me personally, one of the really good things about this process that we had is that we had the opportunity to really look deep into the theory of change of what's an intervention. And this is very important, right? Because we all love talking about interventions. We all love making interventions on scope 3. But at the end of the day, and this is an exercise that we did in the working group, it's like we asked everybody, okay, so what's your intervention? And then at the end, what you have is just multiple use cases that is very hard to find, similarities sometimes because there are different contractual instruments, there are different structures, there are different levels of risk, et cetera, right? So at the end of the day, it's more complex than we think sometimes. At the same time, it's also simpler, right? Because what we did with this theory change was trying to kind of put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And also we reconcile that with a little bit of the systemic vision, right? So we recognize that, for example, there is a transition phase that sometimes we need to do interventions to support some suppliers that need to transition, so for example, changing a boiler or, adopting new practices, etc. Then there is other type of interventions that we do to try to keep and maintain these good practices. And those also, those enforce having a market that goes towards this net zero. And there are the enabling environment type of interventions, right? So this is one way of looking at it. So, I mean, I know that perhaps, and it would be interesting to hear some of the reactions here, but for us, this is just the first step to try to understand this universe of interventions. Now, part of also in this sector-wide chapter, we analyze some of the reporting frameworks, right? And I think this is very timely because I think that also, that there is as I mentioned, the SBTi launched the consultation on the draft, and there are certain topics mentioned. So for us, we explored a little bit and we started testing the notion, for example, if we have an inventory, a physical inventory, and we have something else. And that comes because already we know in the land sector removal guidance and scope 2, we have that precedent, right? That there is a physical world and there is something else that we report next to it. So if we can have this divide, also how would that look like? And we try to reconcile that with also some of the discussions that are happening and the requirements, for example, with SBTi, and also in terms of, for example, as regulatory frameworks with CSRD, right? So looking a little bit into what is required at this moment, but at the same time trying to see where are the opportunities to be able to tackle some of the challenges that some of the companies have at this point, right? So we have this proposal, for example, of having this adjacent to value chain, which I think for us, it sounds very much to what is mentioned as, these activity pools on the SBTi draft, but we need to see because of course that's subject to consultation. But for us, what is very good is to see like the thinking is going somewhere there. And what we did in this output is also to explore some of these implications, right? Now, in the chapter that we went a little bit in depth into the tier 4 type of interventions, we are also building a lot into the knowledge that we develop in the food and agriculture working group. So we're referring to some of this. So you can also find there some of the explanations on what's a supply chain and the different emission factors, the requirements to be aligned to the LSRG, etc. Right? So we refer back to that. We try to understand what that means in the apparel sector. And then one of the things, and also reconciling, going back to the theory of change, where we recognize that there are some suppliers that need to be supported for the transition, and there are some suppliers that already have some practices. We try to answer the question, okay, so what does that mean in terms of scope 3 accounting, right? So we came down to 6 pathways. It's a very simplified way to do that. And of course, we see there are different variables. For example, traceability, the type of emission factor, and the reporting line. But also, what we see is that there are the potential of certificates, market-based instruments to also unlock the ability to be able to establish credible claims across this, right? So we know that at this point there might be some limitations because there are some things that we still need to figure out how they are all working. But at the same time, we recognize that as a possible pathway. Now, finally, on the tier 4 interventions also, we mentioned these complexities, right? And what we see, while we're trying to understand the implications of the land sector removal guidance and all these different discussions that are taking place, I think it's important to consider these complexities going forward to propose solutions, right? So for us, this and this is also for the people in the apparel sector, this is common, but it's important that we consider this at the back of our mind when we are proposing new solutions and we are trying to innovate, right? So the complexity and the fragmentation in the value chains, also the constant blending of the materials, and also the data intensity that we have in this bill of materials and how we manage data, right? A little bit just coming back to the reflections from Deepika, or how, how good is good enough as well. Finally, on the chapter that we talk about the tier 1 to 3 interventions, what you will find is that we introduce this notion of the beyond physical space, the beyond physicality, right? So, and I think this is interesting because this is a little bit, we're not talking properly about, just the usual supply chain and market-based mechanisms that we had in the food and sector, but this is something different. Why are we talking about this? Well, firstly, because to incentivize investments, we know that brands and companies that want to invest, they need to have a return. So it doesn't mean that they need to have a financial return. It means that there has to be a return, right? And in this net zero type of conversations, usually the return is in the shape of a claim. What happens is that, of course, an investment is made into a supplier, and then that supplier produces certain goods for a number of years, and then not all those goods are going to be able to be sourced by this brand, by this investor. Why is that happening? Well, it's because there is a free market, right? So also the supplier needs to see what is the best way to also have be part of the market, right? So of course they are not going to just lock in with one buyer. So because of that, what happens is that investors, they have invested a certain amount that impact a number of goods, but they can only claim a little part of those goods. And those are traceable, while the others they cannot claim directly, right? So there are a number of solutions for this, but for us, we put it under the beyond physicality space because we also notice that this type of, concretely, this problem might have certain implications as well in the way that we claim, on the duration of the claims, etc., right? So some of these learnings are already captured on the document. And building on that, what we also found very interesting, and I hope that because I think this is a topic that is coming back in many spaces, is that it's this right to report, right? Because when we were exploring this about the beyond physicality and we had this type of discussions with the working group, what we identified is the right to report is, I mean, it would make easy many things, right? What is the right to report? Well, it was a requirement. There is a precedent, for example, in the LSRG, in the original draft, there was something mentioned. I don't think that will come on the final version, and if it comes as a recommendation, not a requirement. But at the end of the day, for certain, what we see is that, for example, in the market-based mechanisms on certain types of interventions, this could facilitate a lot the type of claims around them, right? So we included some explorations there in the output, and I think that also to explain why this could be important in such a context. Now, finally, at the end of each of these three main chapters, we have a couple of recommendations, high level, but at the end, these are consistent. Just to summarize what we have discussed during all these 9 months with the different members of the working group. So of course, some recommendations are very kind of straightforward, like standardizing these definitions that, as I was mentioning, what's an intervention? Well, let's talk about what's an intervention and have a common understanding of what could be an intervention, right? Also, how we can rethink the reporting frameworks, how we can leverage some of the certificates as well, or the role of certifications in helping on this transition or to keeping the sustainable products flowing into the value chains. And then, of course, this discussion that we have about these different type of interventions where we need to incentivize these investments where they don't necessarily become a return in a way of a claim or in a way of a credit directly, etc., right? Now, finally, And this is just to close one of my personal reflection, and also a little bit my my concern is that, as I mentioned, everything is in flux, right? So also with the latest developments a couple of weeks ago that we had the net zero standard coming out, one of the things is, and I think this is common for everybody that works in these spaces. Well, okay, so what if this is outdated now, right? So this is one of the things for me. It was an interesting exercise, and also to look at the output and to have, for example, the SBTi document next to it, because I could see some of the concepts referred to, so they are coming back in both. But also one of the things that we have to understand is that sometimes standards, they don't define fully the operationalization pathway, right? So I think this is important, and this is one of the main aims of this type of guidance. Another thing is that we are proposing already ideas, and some of these ideas, by the way, we explore through the use cases, through some of the presentations from the members, and we have documented them. What happens if you do this? What happens if you do that? So, of course, we want to invite, for especially the companies that are thinking about piloting or going into this interpretation, you can look into what we have in the output. I mean, I know that there are a million ways to solve the same problem, but I think that already gives a little bit of perspective based on these discussions that we have with all these different organizations as well. And now finally, as I mentioned, so this is the call to action, because of course we invite everybody to provide feedback. Even though we publish this, our work continues, but please go through the output, download it, just give us feedback on the things, let us know what you think, let us know where we have more opportunities, etc. So please, and use it, And then, of course, the other thing that we want to convey today is that, of course, our work is not done, because we understand that this is an ever-evolving world in Scope 3. So we are launching the next working group that will start sometime in May. So I think it's around 4, 5, 6, 7, something like that in May. So of course, we invite you to join and be part of that. Now, I will, if you have any questions, and also looking at the time, I would like to give the word to some of the members. And if you have questions, please refer them in the Q&A. So for now, let's just give the word to Anneke to share some of the reflections from this working group.
Yes, hi, thank you, Silvana. Yes, I think everybody can hear me, right?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. For the ones that don't know me, my name is Anneke, and I am the Climate and Nature Impact Lead at Bestseller. Bestseller is a brand retailer in Denmark. I'm based in Copenhagen, and we are mainly operating in Europe. But we as Bestseller, we have actually been a member of VCI for several years now. And it's been, I think it's been a great journey. I just want to share some reflections maybe on the last year. I will try to keep it short, but there's just so much that we have done and so much that I can't share. But I think just saying in short that it offered us some really good insights, some super good insights that we can use, also to inform us on where do we want to invest in carbon reductions in a supply chain. And that, of course, again, because our ultimate aim is to have impact on the ground, we want to reduce our emissions as a company. So how can we do that? We need to make investments. And how can we do this best? Also, like Silvana said, how can we get some return of investment on those investments that we do on the ground? So it was a super good working group again this year, as every year. I think two of the main things that we did is doing a deep dive in investments in our shared supply chain. So in our tier 1 to 3 suppliers, how, what kind of interventions do we do, like training or capital investments on some of the capital investments at the suppliers. So that was one of the interventions, or one of the studies we looked into, and the other one was a landscape level interventions for a windmill park in Bangladesh that we're looking at, supporting together with H&M and GFA. So we've also been looking at that case study. And for both of us, it gave us some really good insights on, what are the complexities of wanting to decarbonize our supply chains? How do we do that within our sectors? how can we attribute those claims? How can we claim these? And how do we actually then get a return of investments? Because that's what we want, also to incentivize continual investments in a supply chain, not only by us, but also by other brands. So I think, and then we had a discussion on, how can we be recognized for claiming beyond value chains mitigation, options for market-based mechanisms. And I think those discussions that we had in the working group also learned us a lot about what's going on and what's happening in the industry. So it helped us to get to know a lot more, but also I think with all the discussions that we have and with the output that we have, we can now inform, the science-based targets on our challenges that we have in the industry. And I think that comes very timely with the release of the corporate net zero standard and the update of the greenhouse gas protocol. So I'm looking very much forward also to next year to be part of this again as a company. And then to, hopefully we'll get a better understanding of the corporate net zero standard, and can we maybe define the role for beyond value chain mitigation and how we can use this as a company. And then hopefully also get some more guidance on beyond market-based mechanisms, I should say. And I think just the whole process of having these discussions with the broader industry and having this this forum and the value chain initiative to be this, to inform the science-based targets for climate and also the greenhouse gas protocol. I think we need to make sure that their guidance is going to be practical and aligned with all the realities that we face in the sector. So yes, I'm looking very much forward also to next year as a collective to keep on pushing for the right guidance to be out there.
Thank you very much, Anneke. Thanks a lot for those words. And now I want to invite Daniel Rowe from Primark to also give a little bit some reflections.
No, brilliant. Thank you, Silvana, and good afternoon, everyone. So hopefully I'm audible. Perfect. So as Silvana said, my name is Dan Rowe, and I'm the Climate Change Programme Senior Manager here in Primark, so based in our headquarters in Dublin, Ireland. So for those that don't know, Primark are a brand and retailer predominantly operating across Europe and the US. So one of my key responsibilities as part of this role is I lead Primark's decarbonization programme, which involves developing and managing our strategy to meet Primark's decarbonisation targets. So Primark are signatories to the Fashion Industry Charter for Climate Action, and we have a validated science-based target, and therefore an ambitious Scope 3 target, which largely forms the basis of why we joined the Value Change Initiative in its first instance. So I suppose very similar to Annika, I've been asked for my reflections on the last year, and I think what I'm going to say is going to very much echo what was said and a lot of what was presented by Silvana during the presentation we just saw. But effectively just categorizing my thoughts around three questions. So the first being, what was the biggest challenge that we face within Scope 3? I suppose for me, in principle and in theory, the route to decarbonising our supply chain is well understood. There are opportunities for efficiency, for energy switching, for material sourcing changes. However, the challenges arise when you want to actually pull on any of these levers and start launching decarbonisation projects and ultimately making those decarbonisation claims. So the first real pertinent challenge, considering the group, is aligning data and reporting with interventions and projects to reduce emissions. So we report as a single company, very much covering products, but we take action in a shared value chain. And therefore, the ownership of emissions, both in terms of impact, but also reductions, are shared across multiple actors across this value chain. So the challenge is, how do we make sure that we're intervening and spending our money in terms of impact, but also looking at emissions reductions in the most appropriate way in all of this? The second, I suppose, as noted by Silvana earlier, is the regulatory framework standards and the instability which currently exists there. So when developing what we want to do and looking at how do we make claims, there is a challenge in understanding, is this all going to be compliant and will this help towards hitting our targets? So from that, the basis of those challenges, I was working with VCI basically helped me and my team in navigating them. I guess the first is the production of this report that's been put out today. It's the clarifying the gaps in those existing frameworks around emission reduction claims and proposing a solution which maintains the rigor in reporting while supporting a business case in order for change. So very much things like the introduction of a proposed new reporting line to show full investment into an intervention rather than just what's claimable according to conventional inventory accounting. Similarly, I think there was a huge opportunity to connect with other brands, service providers, and representatives from frameworks and standards. So very much we're all arriving here talking about the same level of challenge, but everyone has approached it slightly differently, solved different aspects of the challenge themselves. So there's been a huge opportunity for co-learning, but equally to find new pockets of expertise that we didn't necessarily know was out there. So very much helping extend our journey going forward. And then we were very luckily allowed to participate as a case study observer in the US Cotton Trust Protocol case study on cotton, which for an organization like ourselves, who we have our own cotton program, so the Primark Cotton Project or PCP, this is quite useful for us to see how do we evolve that going forward in light of everything that we're talking about. Excuse me. So the final point was just around what we want to do next with the VCI, and very much echoing everything that Annika said. I think principally for us, it's building on the guidance that's proposed and the set of solutions that's being created to really start to influence those standards and frameworks, to ultimately align reporting and investment and business casing across the board. And equally is the push for more transparency across the same value chain. So we're very much looking forward to continuing the work with the team and everything else, and to seeing how this engagement brings more fruition over the course of the next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan. So I think we are very much on time. And I think there are not so many questions. So there was one question for Deepika. So thanks a lot for taking that. And let's move on to the closing, because we want to thank you again for being here. And again, it's an invitation. Please download the guidance, send us feedback, give us ideas. Like, even if it's on the visuals, please, because a lot of this part is the learning, right? How do we express things? How do we, the concepts that we capture, etc. So please just be in touch with us and let us know. Of course, also, if you're not a member, you are welcome to become a member. Why? And I'm going to tell you, because also we have for general members. So even if you're not in the Apparel working group, we have an emission factor lab that we're going to launch, and this is for all members. And this is going to be really interesting to understand also how to leverage this decarbonization and the interventions, right? So this is one of the great things that is coming. Again, the other one is the next Apparel and Footwear working group, of course. And yeah, so many things coming also for members, the ones that are members, that we have some sessions already coming soon. And well, thanks a lot and stay in touch. So thanks for joining today and hope to see you soon. Thank you.